Hey, welcome back. This is Design Over Time. It's a daily video log series where I talk about game design topics and a different topic every day, but we pretty much keep building on the things that we've learned in the past. So if you're new to the series, there's a playlist of mini episodes. We're on episode 11 right now, but they're each about 15-20 minutes long. And today I'm not going to go over anything too heavy. There's not a lot to learn, but I just wanted to look at a bunch of different levels, a bunch of different cases, a bunch of different examples for how we can better understand 2D and 3D space and how that greatly affects the kinds of gameplay, level design, and other things that are involved in a gameplay system. So, we're going to pick one game series, we're going to take a look at it, and as you can see, we're going to be looking at the Sonic series. So, this is a series I've been playing since I was a kid. I grew up on Sonic 3 pretty much, and played many of them since, and many of them are bad, but that's really all beside the point. We're going to be really looking at on a pretty fundamental level how these different games are doing different things with their space, how they're defining space, how Sonic can move through space. I'll show you right here. We're going to be talking about how space really affects mechanics. That's this dark blue color. We're going to be talking about how space affects level design, and we're going to be talking about feedback, right? That's a really big deal. Yeah, feedback is a really big deal for video games. Being able to see what's coming, being able to know what's up, and having that information feed back into the player decisions that you make, that's a pretty big deal. So take a look at this. It's Sonic 3. It's the game I grew up on, the classic 2D setup here. And just kind of take a look at how much you can see on a given screenshot, like how many different elements can fit on the screen. Two trees, Sonic and Tails. Sonic positioned mostly in the center. We're not going to talk too much about camera design. There's some really good articles out there that talk about the camera design of 2D platformers, but we're just going to take a look at, in general, what kinds of gameplay challenges and things you might expect in 2D. As you can see here, hiding things off the top of the screen is a classic 2D side-scrolling maneuver because the camera generally follows you, so you can't really look up at your leisure. It's not like a 3D camera or a 3D world where you can just look around. But yeah, from 2D side-scrolling we get this top-down 2D kind of situation with, punctuated 3D, because in this game you can jump, this mini-game. But Sonic has always been a game that plays around with multiple perspectives and building little mini-games out of different things just for the purpose of gameplay variety, control variety, and I think it's really cool that Sonic does that. So obviously pros in this are just like the pros that you would find in a 3D game. You can see further in the distance. So yeah, and this camera in particular is always locked on the Sonic, so whenever he jumps, the camera moves up. That means you kind of lose track of the things that are below you, unless the camera is sort of locked at the very bottom of the stage. So that makes a difference. I kind of like the Mario version better, but ultimately there's not too much that you can fit on the screen, not with the Genesis style graphics, because they're not going to do any tricky Mode 7 sprite rotations or any zooming out or anything like that. So this is pretty much the fixed camera perspective that you'll get. And as you can see, you can kind of barely see the challenges as they're framed when Sonic moves up to them. Like, you can't see the top of that shuttle loop. When you roll into it, you can't see where you're going. You just kind of have to go with the flow and trust that the game's not going to screw you over too much. Well, we all know Sonic likes to screw you over just a little bit. But that's pretty much how the 2D Sonic games operate. The whole game pretty much continues on in the same style. Let's see what happens when we compare that to Sonic Rush. So this is the first level. Sonic Rush. So as you can see a lot more. This is the first game on the DS, which uses both screens and makes a nice vertical layout. And even though, horizontally you can't see too far ahead of yourself, vertically you have quite a large view of the gameplay world. I really thought this was an excellent thing that they did for Sonic Rush. I wrote articles about this a long time ago, and I still love this. Just really taking advantage of the DS's strengths and making a lot of vertically oriented level design. I mean, look at this. You're going up a tall tree. You're climbing up walls. Right here, you're climbing up walls, and they really did pretty much take a lot of horizontally oriented things and made them vertical just because of the extra screen real estate and how the camera is positioned. And as you can also see, Sonic is pretty small on the screen. This means you can see even more because the camera is, by default, a little more zoomed out than what you would find in maybe Sonic and Knuckles. And this is an example of the bonus mode that you can find in Sonic Rush. You know, Sonic Rush and Sonic Rush 2 did play around with a lot of different types of bonus modes, but this one is touchscreen and stylus based, so all the action shifts to the bottom screen. Once again, it's in 3D. You slide the stylus left and right to grab rings. I almost called them coins like I always do. And like I said before, in the other bonus mode, you could jump. In this mode, you can't really jump, but you can ramp off the sides and hit special bumpers in order to shoot into the sky. Turn you down a little bit. Right here. So then it just does these little mini games in midair, and you tap the numbers and you fall back down. So it's pretty cool how they can dip into 3D for this very tunnel-like racing effect. But we'll see a lot more of this in the later Sonic games. So yeah, some of the benefits of 2D, especially when you get a nice zoomed out view like this, is that, you know, the spatial relationship between everything that you're trying to do is really consistent. 2D allows you to judge distances more accurately and just do simple translations in order to figure out if you're going to make a jump or get on top of something, hit an enemy, whatever. And we all know that about 2D. It's much more simple than 3D, but just understanding from a feedback and a gameplay perspective, it really does introduce a lot less complexity to the interactions, but it doesn't make the interactions less interesting, dynamic, or cool. It just makes it really clean by default. Alright, let's look at another Sonic. Sonic Rush is cool. Believe it or not, I played almost all these Sonic games. I don't know how.
Never did take this move off because.
But this is Sonic and the Secret Rings. And we got our friend talking here. I'll turn him down a little bit. But yeah, this is Sonic and the Secret Rings. It's the first game in the series that introduces this sort of steer left and right style going down a lane Sonic gameplay. You saw it a little bit in the bonus modes of Sonic Rush, but this one's the full game is dedicated to basically using the Wiimote to steer left and right. And as you can see, sometimes they break off into these little parts where you just shimmy forward and backwards. Yeah, I really like how in the Sonic series you see a lot of level set pieces and a lot of level challenges that change the camera, change the controls, and really limit things, you know, for the purpose of whatever. Make it more cinematic, change up the pace, make it simpler, whatever. So we see a lot of interesting things going on right here. Sonic's going to go back to the default control style. You pretty much steer left and right. And you can jump, you can kind of do a charge jump, I think. I've only played this a little bit, the first 3 worlds or so before I gave up because I hated it. But it did some interesting things, and that's kind of what I want to talk about. Like taking a look at these, if he even makes it. This game has grind rails, and Sonic does a lot with grind rails actually. So this perspective and making Sonic go forward automatically. You know, it's kind of like an auto runner, but unlike the 2D auto runners, this one has a little bit more spatial definition, right? You can go left, right, and up. You can find alternate paths. You can jump on top of enemies, soar over obstacles, and the game really does give you a lot of freedom to really just explore the space above the track. For better or for worse, I found myself jumping off and plummeting to my death a lot, which is more or less classic Sonic, but you know, we don't really have to focus on the negatives right now. I just want to pay attention to the camera. Oh, and that's a grind rail, right? And there's very specific sections where Sonic can hop back and forth between 3 grind rails that I want to talk about. Because yeah, the movement is very analog outside of these grind rails, but when you hit the grind rails, as you might expect, you lock onto it like this, do it, lock on there, and then you can hop left and right even though you didn't do it. Alright, so I think we have a grind rail part coming up right here. You know, grab the little pickups, it kind of leads you into the right path. Running into enemies, classic Sonic, going too fast. Here's a grind rail, you can see him hopping on it. It's going to give him some choices. See all the grind rails down there? They have obstacles that you don't want to fly into. Whoa, he just jumped off the rails. That's kind of crazy. But yeah, that's exactly what I mean. The game gives you freedom of the analog movement, and then sometimes they give you these very discrete interactions to sort of snap onto, which is generally how grind rails work in games like this. I'll show you a little bit of the boss. But going from the analog movement both vertically and horizontally and then going into these discrete left and right hops is pretty neat. I really like it when games introduce really discrete interactions because, you know, I like the cleanness that discrete interactions bring to the gameplay. I like how they can you know, really telegraph things well and just give you a really simple challenge to play into, especially when those interactions, those controls are a little bit unfamiliar to the standard gameplay. I mean, everyone remembers the classic Battletoads hover bikes where you instead of playing Battletoads, you're playing basically an up, down, left, right dodging game. Not up, down, left, right, just up, down, middle, yeah, and jump. Okay, yeah, so that's what Battletoads does. But as you can see, these bosses are in a very similar fashion. There's no discrete lanes that you hop in, but you use your speed. You can speed up or slow down a little bit. You dodge things coming at you, and this whole idea is actually pretty interesting. The way that they're using the space and letting you kind of move around with some freedom, but not a lot because you're still going down basically a racetrack, and there are specific points where you can branch off and do shortcuts, but this is essentially the core of the game. So yeah, now let's take a look at Sonic Unleashed. You know,
All right,
360
here we
PS3.
go. Sploosh!
Our friend's talking, so let's just tone him down a little bit. But yeah, you can see this is kind of an extension of the gameplay that you saw in Sonic Unleashed. You know, giving you a little lane to move left or right in. It looks like there's a lot less room to move left and right in these particular stages. But you know, with the 3D camera, the game's free to zoom in, zoom out, and as long as you're sort of pushed along heavily in this on rails, almost linear style gameplay, then the camera can do crazy things without making the player too discombobulated. Like right here, much of this is automatic, and they have prompts because the screen's moving so fast and the camera angle's not really looking ahead at where Sonic's going. Ooh, more grind rails. You know, little prompts like that, even the left and right bumper to switch rails pops up just to give players a little bit more clarity in their interactions. But stuff like this, I'll show you. I didn't even see these drop-off points coming up. Right here, you've got to get into the middle or you die. That's super hard to see. Who can see that? Like that. Can you tell that the rails go off into nothing? No. How about here? Like barely, but this is not enough time to make a reaction, is there? And then I guess if you go on these side parts, you'll do these red rings and you'll jump forward, I guess, and you'll miss that section. I have no idea. Maybe there wasn't a bad choice. That would be nice. But yeah, a lot of the newer Sonic games do more with rapidly moving cameras, cinematic angles, that kind of sense of speed, because they blind you basically. So the more things that rush past your character, you feel like you're going faster, so on and so forth. And again, breaking down into 2D sections that's necessary. That was one of the things that people were most excited about when they saw the previews, that it has like a blend of different styles, and if it could return to 2D styles, at least somewhat, that'd be good for the series. But more so than Sonic Rush, where this gameplay, you're just moving so quickly past things, you can hardly tell what you're going, what you're running into, what you're going past, where you're supposed to go next, and you know, the 3D geometry of it all really does help give it that organic look, but it also detracts because you don't exactly know what you're doing or where you're going, and that's Sonic Unleashed. So yeah, then you get this sort of third-person action game style camera, which is not over the shoulder, it's pulled back, and it kind of follows you around in areas that are pretty much designed to funnel you into one direction, so the camera can be a little bit better at framing things, but I don't think this game actually does have a good camera. Lots of juicy slowdown. Okay, so yeah, then you battle stuff. Much slower gameplay, much more combat oriented, which is pretty interesting because the enemies in Sonic never did provide much interplay, much interesting interactions. It was just kind of like blow past them or get hit by them because they're cheap. But in this game, they added a whole action brawler style gameplay mode, whole gameplay style that they alternate in between. And because it has a more action game focus, enemies are a bigger deal. They can do more diverse enemy types, and fighting them actually is a thing. Like as you can see here, you know, nice idea, but the execution. I mean, this is why modern Sonic games have such a stigma. It doesn't look too bad. It wasn't too bad. Just kind of a 1, 2, 3 paint by the numbers kind of thing, like just hit enemies, and not really a lot to it. Okay, so next Sonic games. Yeah, so this is Sonic Lost World for the Wii U. I played a bunch of this, didn't beat it again because it pissed me off. But you know, taking a very Mario Galaxy-esque style world and camera design, so everything isn't based on basically floors, rooms, boxes, and buildings. It's based on these crazy, like abstract structures, tubes, pipes, planetoids, and that's a fundamental difference. Like right there, that's a planetoid. You can't tell me anything else. And they were so coy about saying what kind of game influenced the development of this game, but come on, like it's obvious. But I really felt like this first world was pretty good, pretty decent. It has secrets, it has alternate paths. Look, I'll show you here. So one of the best parts about 3D is that you can put a lot more things in front of the player, and you can put a lot more things in the space. The hard part is, how does the player see it clearly and how does the player navigate? So when you build your levels around a tube like this, then you can go all the way around the tube 360. That means this entire level is actually wrapped around, and you have a lot of non-linear freedom. Even though you're still pushed forward, you can pick at what point on the tube you run down. And even though this player kind of runs straight forward, you could just loop all the way around if you wanted to. And I think that's really neat. The look of this game is just really neat. And trying to avoid bushes is a lot better than avoiding like just hard stops, because the bushes slow you down but they don't kill you. And this first level, this intro level, just did such a great job. But then something like, so then yeah, you can fall down, you can jump up. There's some slower platforming parts with springs that help you aid in your platforming. There's sections like this would just look crazy, and then you thought you were going to fly off, but you actually hit a spring and you go to other parts. Like, lots of neat ways to tuck in things off the screen and build secrets and to provide multiple paths up. So really thinking in the three-dimensionality of 3D and building things all around for Sonic to interact with, and as long as you can sort of get to an area, you can get through the level. Let's contrast that with this, which happens. And like many of the other Sonic games, they blend the different camera styles to create multiple types of gameplay. So the camera, they don't let Sonic move too quickly horizontally, and the world does appear to be rotating underneath you rather than you moving through it, which is kind of a good effect. But check that out, the camera just zooms out, because if you got to see more, why not zoom the camera out? It's something you can do very easily in 3D and not so easily in 2D. It can even make different enemy types that get in your way. Like this whole gameplay right here is less about rushing forward and more about platforming. So instead of trying to fit all the different gameplay types that they want to do with Sonic into one game, they just keep it like this and say, hey, these slower parts are going to be where you platform. And contrast this with this, where you have inside tunnel type level design. And essentially running down a tube is the same as running on the outside of a tube, but the tunnel effect's a little different. You can have a little bit more interactivity by jumping up through the tube, or have enemies drop down from the top. So it's not exactly the same as the cylinder, but these tube tunnel style game challenges are still pretty interesting in Sonic, and looking down the tube is pretty important. And finding secrets like that, all pretty neat. Like, these are all neat ideas. So this is Sonic Utopia, and as you can see, unlike the styles that we just went over in the video, Sonic Utopia is really working hard to translate the feeling of the classic 2D Sonics into a 3D, into a new 3D style that we really haven't seen before. So this is unlike Sonic 06 and Sonic on the Dreamcast, which I didn't show any of because too bad. And it's really trying to give players a sense of forward momentum, speed, and traversing the space. You can see it's heavily using the homing enemy attack. It has really wide open spaces, like that area just right there. I'll pause it. This bridge, for example, it's huge. Huge. Sonic looks like a tiny little ant running around this huge world. And part of the reason why a lot of things have to be big is because your controls, it's still hard to control something moving in a 3D space, no matter what. But you get somebody's this much speed and X amount of air control, and they gotta have a little bit easier time landing where they want to. So you generally make things bigger in order to make that sort of where you can go and how you're gonna land, and how your player character is moving a little more intuitive and obvious. So look, everything is huge. And the fields are huge, and the enemies are like few and far between, and they're pretty much there for you to use homing attacks on and moving on. But as far as the density of elements too, the bigger world means there's less to do in any given time. And in some ways it does create that feeling in 2D when you're like, oh, I'm just gonna run down this hill or go down the shuttle loop, but still there is a bit more openness, because even in 3D by default, when you make an area this large, it's large horizontally, both ways, and vertically in the air. So as you can see, some of these jumps are gonna have so much hang time, it's kind of crazy. You're like, whoa, what am I doing? Yeah, so that's one of the challenges a lot of developers have to do when they're making their game in 3D. Pretty much looking at their core interactions and saying, how much space do we need to pull this off, and how does that affect the way we design levels and create challenges? But yeah, these guys look like they're doing a great job making this sort of proof of concept from scratch with the sound design, the graphics engine, the look and feel. It looks pretty neat. But one of the interesting things you have to keep in mind is, how much variety of core, how much can we get out of the core gameplay elements, right? Sonic can jump, he can spin, he can roll into things, he can kind of explore, but really, as you saw in all the other Sonic games, you have to add so much more just to give the gameplay enough variety, right? A whole different gameplay mode for bonus stages, a whole different type of level design just to keep things fresh and not have the entire game be just running forward at max speed. So yeah, the thing I really want to highlight by looking at all these Sonic games is that even though you typically think of 2D games as being side-scrolling or top-down and 3D games as being like first-person over the shoulder and just let you roam around in a world, there are a bunch of different ways to do 3D. 3D is actually can encompass just about every type of 2D and 1D gameplay within it by creating rails or doing other kind of discrete types of interactions that limit the way you move, and it can still be 3D at any point by letting you break off from those restrictions. So 3D, there's tons of potential. There's more styles than you may think, and there's more pros and cons to all those different styles. So picking the right one for your game, understanding the drawbacks and limitations for making one style versus another is something that we're going to be thinking about. And in the future, I'm going to talk a lot more about different new types of level design and new feedback elements, new modes and features, new features that will eliminate a lot of the cons that I see in gameplay, like we see in Sonic, the 3D gameplay, in order to really focus things on making the interactions as diverse, as dynamic, and as clear as possible. So that's the goal. I hope you enjoyed this little quick look at Sonic Utopia and all the other cool Sonic games. I'll leave the links down to the description below for Sonic Utopia in case you want to check it out. And follow the channel. So don't forget to subscribe to Design Oriented by clicking the subscribe button down below. You can follow us on Twitter at Design Oriented or me on Twitter at KirbyKid. But that has been our 11th episode of Design Over Time, and I will see you guys next time.